I grew up on the coast of a sick Baltic Sea. Once thriving animals like eels, cod and harbour porpoise were fading into obscurity. Algae took over the once lively waters as dead zones were expanding under the surface. And even the skies above grew quieter as the birds began to vanish. Against that backdrop of environmental decay, I saw communities grapple with the impacts on their ways of living. It seemed as if the sea was losing her spirit, and it was frightening. For a long time, humans put too much pressure on the sea. We took more than our fair share of fish, dammed rivers, and let over-fertilizing and toxic substances poison our waters. It hurts to think that we almost destroyed our sea, a sea we claimed to love. But fortunately, things changed. My generation woke up to the realization that our well-being depends on nature. So we took action to stop the exploitation because we need resilient ecosystems that are rich with life. And we bent the curve on biodiversity laws in the Baltic Sea. Wetlands, coasts, and marine habitats were restored and protected, and our rivers got to flow freely again. Overfishing was brought to a halt. We finally stopped investing in harmful activities and instead focused on sustainable agriculture and nature-friendly renewable energy. Now nature has the space to just be nature again. Fish stocks recovered and plant and animal life are flourishing once more. Our actions transformed the sea for a healthier future, one that we can proudly pass on to our children and grandchildren. But we are not there yet.
Warmly welcome to the side event, Waves of Change, How Do We Accelerate Action and Finance to Save the Baltic Sea? Now we'll see where we're going to have a little bit of a presentation here shortly. So last year we had the State of the Baltic Sea report released, showing what the state of the Baltic Sea is. And unfortunately, the Baltic Sea is not in a good state. There's a variety of pressures acting on our very unique ecosystem here, everything from land use, pollution, nutrient runoff, overfishing, etc., acting in singular but also cumulatively. And this is resulting in degraded ecosystems. We have fish stocks that are not in a good state. Water birds, marine mammals, equally so. But this is a very important one. This report also shows that when we have implemented actions, when we've implemented measures, they work. One of the big issues, though, is that we haven't done enough yet. And this report also shows that the cost of inaction is really high. One figure alone is that we stand to lose 9 billion euros per year in the loss of recreational value if we have the Baltic Sea in an unhealthy state. But if we flip it around, we can also have value towards society worth 5.6 billion euros per year if we have a healthy Baltic Sea. We can have 10 billion euros earned every year from natural nutrient sequestration and more billions from natural carbon sequestrations if we have healthy ecosystems. Here we go. But where is the finance coming in the Baltic Sea region? That was something that we in WWF wanted to look into, because one of the issues we know is that it isn't enough, well, there's a gap of finance towards biodiversity action. So we wanted to look into, do we have a sustainable blue economy in the maritime sectors here in the Baltic Sea? And we found out that this economy is not sustainable. Out of all the financial flows that we researched, 79% of all debt, 56% of all equity goes into sectors that have a negative impact on the Baltic Sea, or even on society and human values around linked to the Baltic Sea. So finance is currently not working with us, and there's a need to stop financing the bad and start financing the green. But how do we do that? And how do we ensure that we can maximize impact, accelerate action for the Baltic Sea, and ensure that there is enough funding available for this type of action? But how could this work, Misha?
Okay, an easy question, of course. So how to make it work? We all know that actually the Baltic Sea Action Plan, the original one, was adopted already in 2007 with the idea that we should have and reach good environmental status by 2021. But as we know, we do not really deliver. So that is why in 2021 we had to come up with the updated Baltic Sea Action Plan, and of course it was not only because of the delays in implementation, but it was also because of the new knowledge, new information, new data, and new actions and measures, of course, delivered. And if you can change the slide. Together with WWF, already in 2020, as an input to the development of the updated Baltic Sea Action Plan, we came together with the Baltic Shadow Plan that hopefully provided a lot of new ground and new resources, new knowledge and new suggestions, proposals for measures to be included into updated BSAP. And basically we have also set up a vision for ourselves of the Baltic we want to achieve, and that it should contain enough pristine and wild marine and coastal areas, acting as safe havens for animals and plants, and being removed from harmful human activities. Are we there yet? Well, basically, I don't think so. And that's what we came up also with another strategy that was developed by our network, in addition to what Johanna was saying about the refocused financial streams that we need to address. We also think that we need to address priority actions in each of the segments of the Baltic Sea Action Plan. And what we also witness right now is that it is not only that the Baltic Sea is probably in the same condition, or maybe in certain areas even worse, but we do have also a major insecurity in the region that we all know what we are talking about. So I can just name a couple of examples, but what I also wanted to say that besides the 4 segments in the Baltic Sea Action Plan that we wish to implement jointly in a coordinated manner and by all the nations, we would need to address also yet another pillar. It's not only about eutrophication, hazardous substances, biodiversity and maritime activities, but it's also about the support to Ukraine, support to the green recovery actions, and support to rehabilitation of the Ukrainian economy and Ukrainian environmental infrastructure. So basically, I can name the examples even connected to that. So in eutrophication, we need to deal with wastewater treatment plants in the Baltic Sea part, Ukrainian part of the Baltic Sea catchment. In hazardous substances, we have the problem of obsolete pesticides and pharmaceuticals, and even more pharmaceuticals that are originating currently from these circumstances in Ukraine. Likewise, in biodiversity, we need to protect the environmental and nature backbone, establishing more protected areas. Well, maritime activities perhaps not apply directly, but of course there are also large infrastructure projects that needs to be addressed there as well. But what I wanted to say is also that what we came up with the conclusion in our report that is going to be published until the end of the year, and now you can find the summary of this report available by the QR code. There was a flyer for this report at the distribution table. What we wanted to say that we would like really to go into coordinated implementation of actions and not just addressing the conventional end-of-pipe solutions, but actually what we feel, what needs to be done is the restoration of nature and nature protection actions to be in place first. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to convey.
Well, with that, I'm actually going now to invite our list of panelists here. We have a very interesting panel, and we're going to try to answer some of these questions. How do we accelerate change? What is needed to ensure that we can have actions at a local level where it really has impact? And what are the financing mechanisms that are needed to fund this? But with that, I would like to invite to the stage Megan McEnroe, Vice Chair of the youth organisation Fältbiologerna from Sweden. We have Mark Eskelund, Policy Advisor from the Danish Coastal Fisheries Producer Association from Denmark. We have Airi Kulmala, who's a Senior Advisor at the Central Union of Agricultural Producers and Forest Owners in Finland, but you're here representing Baltic Farmers Forum on the environment.
And then we have Tobias Goldschmidt, the State Minister of Energy Transition, Climate Protection, Energy and Nature, State Government of Schleswig-Holstein, Germany. Ivona Pavlic-Kavel-Pavlik, she is joining us online, and Ivona is head of Professor Krzysztof Skóra, Marine Station of Faculty of Oceanography and Geography of University of Gdańsk, Poland.
Hello, I hope I'm heard well.
And then I would like to invite also Anja Nysten, Director of Environment and Sustainability, Nordic Environmental Finance Corporation, Finland.
And I'd like to also let you know here in the audience that we will have a little bit of a discussion here with our fellow panelists. Then you'll be invited to pose questions, both in the room and then online. And for those viewing us online, you can post the questions in the Zoom chat. All right.
Good. Well, without any further delay, I would like actually to pose the question to Regan. So Regan, what is in your perspective, what are you hoping the Baltic Sea should look like? So which Baltic Sea you would like to inherit? And perhaps we can pass that mic.
Thank you, Misha. And honestly, it's a horribly depressing answer, but there's a part of me who wants to say, I don't know. I've never known a healthy Baltic Sea. I've never known a Baltic where we can fish herring, fish cod. I've never known a Baltic where we don't have immense algae blooms every summer, every spring, getting earlier and earlier in the year. So the most that I can say that I hope for is any change. But change is moving too slowly. We know that. We've just seen the video. We all know it from our backgrounds. I'd like to see a Baltic where change moves quickly and in the right direction. I'd like to see a Baltic where we can live off of not just the land, but what the ocean has to offer. I'd like to see a Baltic Sea region which puts workers first, puts people first, and puts my generation first. We're no longer the youngest generation. And our children coming after us deserve to have a sea that they can live off of.
Thank you, Regan. I think that is something that many of us would like to see. And I would like to pose a question to Ivona from a scientific perspective, listening here to Regan, who wants to see a change for a healthier Baltic Sea in the future. What are your reflections from the result of the HOLAS 3 assessment, and what is needed to prioritize action to ensure a healthy Baltic Sea in the future?
Let me answer both as a researcher, but also as a teacher who teach both the very young people, but also the students and the adults. And I would answer a little bit differently, because what I would love to see for the Baltic Sea is a aware society which lives around the Baltic Sea, and they realize what impact they might have, and they do have, in every single activity which they do. So I think this is the very important goal, which is also occurring in all the documents according to the Baltic Sea Action Plan, that the education and the public awareness is very important. And of course, the Baltic Sea is several changes, but if we minimize the impact of human activity, especially this which we know is harmful, and there are a lot of known harmful activities, which also science proved, then we would probably may dream about the healthy Baltic Sea.
Thank you, Anna. So a lot about minimizing human impacts and also ensuring that we have educated populations around the Baltic Sea, better awareness about the state of our beloved sea. Tobias, from a minister working at a more of a local level, well, state level in Germany, in Schleswig-Holstein, how have you been working for the Baltic Sea and action for the Baltic Sea? Are you engaged in the work with the HELCOM Baltic Sea Action Plan, or are you doing other actions for the Baltic Sea in Schleswig-Holstein?
First of all, thanks for having me and inviting me to this meeting. We just adopted a Baltic Action Plan for Schleswig-Holstein, a regional Baltic Action Plan that is very much in line with the HELCOM Action Plan. And for that reason, I'm really happy that we managed to adopt such a plan in our state cabinet. It's a government coalition consisting of the Green Party and the Conservative Party. And we managed to reach a consensus in our government about the necessity of protecting the Baltic and about the concrete actions that we are going to take. For example, we are going to establish new marine protected areas, strictly protected areas, no-take zones at about 12.5% of our Schleswig-Holstein Baltic region. That means really a big move in the German discussion about protecting the Baltic Sea. And we were discussing for about 1 year the creation of a national park. And I've been in many discussions and at many panels, and the discussion was very, very it was a big shitstorm because many lobby groups were opposing, and they were concerned that they were leaving their freedom and their liberty. And at the end, everybody agreed that it is necessary to protect the Baltic in a better way than we did before. We had a public survey about it, and the population, even the conservative part of the population, said, yes, we need more nature protection for the Baltic Sea. And that makes me happy and hopeful, actually.
May I just ask, how did you manage to overcome these challenges and the opposition that you faced in the beginning from various stakeholder groups? How did you get everyone on board at the end?
We talked about a national park, which is the premium of nature protection, and it was a big idea. And a public debate started, and people started thinking about the state of the Baltic Sea and about all the problems. People didn't know about the problems, so it's a public debate. And at the end, I said, okay, at the moment we won't do the national park, but we will do marine protected areas, strictly protected areas. And the Conservative Party agreed to that because they understood that action is necessary.
Thank you very much, Tobias. And of course, and indeed, the stakeholder dialogue and negotiations are certainly needed in all those difficult processes. And we do understand that these are not easy negotiations in many cases. But I would like actually to pose a question to Mark now, being one of the stakeholder representatives. And Tobias mentioned about the conservation targets that needs to be reached, and we all know that there are important actions to reach 30 by 30 targets. And of course, we also know about the maritime spatial planning being developed within the region quite a lot. And we also know about the measures to reduce bycatch, for example, in fisheries. So what, in your opinion, how fishermen should be involved in planning marine protected areas and maritime spatial planning, and perhaps also in developing bycatch reduction measures?
Well, thank you. I mean, it's a question that first needs a sort of introduction to my organization, in the sense that I represent the commercial fishermen from Denmark, but commercial fishermen only fishing low impact gear, and only commercial fishermen. That means that we have no trawlers, we have no high seas fishers. So they fish very local, and as such, I think the answer for the question for my sake is in some sense yes and no. I mean, in some ways it makes a lot of sense to involve the fishermen. Knowledge is not complete. Their part and their experiences is an important part of the picture when deciding these different MPAs and different measures. I suppose that it was also the case in Germany that the fishermen were involved because they have some knowledge, and some places are good fishing spots. Are they to be reserved because of the fish, or could there also be space for some kind of fisheries? There can be different various of closed areas and MPAs. There could be some that allow bottom contact, some that do not. And our fishermen are fishing in a way that, well, we like to say that they're fishing in a better balance with nature, because they have less impact on the nature they're fishing in, especially in case of bycatch for fish. We do, the gill netters, some of the low impact fishermen do have some other challenges, but I mean, the way that we are seeing it, and the way that we are seeing how we should actually incorporate the fishermen, is also to look at what is the issues. My organization has a target that basically says we want more fish in the sea, and that's actually quite a big problem in the Baltic Sea at the moment. There's a lot of other groups, including some of the marine mammals, that are actually doing quite well. Some of the marine birds are also doing quite well, but we actually have a big problem with the fish. And the low impact fisheries is a solution on how to fish in a more a better way, in the sense that we are taking some of the fish out of the sea that has a higher value, but are also are allowing that the small fish and all the unwanted catches, or the unwanted fish, is actually not being caught. So it makes sense to involve them. But on the other hand, there are also some questions that you cannot leave up to the fishermen. There are also some questions where the fishermen will have a special. Well, I mean, they are an industry. They work with something, and it's also sometimes in their commercial interest to oppose of something that might, for environmental concern, has another angle. And that's something that, I mean, might not be up to the fishermen to agree on themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And interesting to hear that from you, Mark, the goal of having more fish in the sea. Yeah, I mean, it comes down to it. For fishing to work, you need to have more fish in the sea, which we currently have an issue with in the Baltic Sea. And another stakeholder group, AIRI, farmers, there's a need for action when it comes to farming practices to reduce nutrient runoff affecting the health of our Baltic Sea. But currently we're seeing a lot of uprising in Europe when it comes to farmer protests. And where do you see, how do we get farmers on board now for more environmental action? Firstly, do you think that we need more environmental action in farming practices around the Baltic Sea? And how can we get farmers on board on this?
I think that farmers need also clean nature. We are living together with the nature, and we need to work also for cleaner Baltic Sea, and that's really important. But we also know that only a small part of farmers are living very close to coastal areas, and those people might be difficult to motivate to do things for Baltic Sea. And we should maybe talk more that take care of your local waters, because then we are in the same catchment area. Finally, we have also cleaner water for leaching to the Baltic Sea, but that is easier to motivate them to do those. And we don't always need more things. We have already really much good measures, but we do need to use them in a wider area. They need to be more targeted and so on. Then I still believe that voluntary actions are the best ones, and because they motivate better, and you can put your include them better to your normal activities on farm level. But if they don't work, we might use this. We can supplement with those different kind of norms, these voluntary measures, but they can't replace them. That is how we think that we need to work together. We need all for that work, and that is our. And farmers need to do their share. Everyone need to do their share.
Thank you very much, Airi. And I actually would like to continue and ask another question to you, because I actually feel that we all understand that those measures are costly. Would it be voluntary or mandatory? And what do you think? Should it be the farmer to bear the cost of those actions, or how we can perhaps think about different financial incentives to be developed to support farmers also in implementing those environmentally friendly measures in agriculture? Maybe you can think out about some subsidies schemes, or how to actually do the subsidies that they match the purpose and they really provide for efficient protection.
Yeah, common agriculture policy contains many measures what can use to protect waters, for example, but there are also support for nature and biodiversity and climate, and those we don't have money for everything. That means that we need also something else than just subsidies. And because I think that because farmers are producing for food for all of us, and that means that whole value chains should take part of this. That we need to think farmers, we need to think about industry and trade, and they need to take part of, farmers need to get enough money for the products that they produce, because when the farming is profitable, then they also have money to do those water actions what need to be done, and that is way. And also all consumers need to take part of. We all pay taxes, and that comes from those, and it comes to farming practices through those subsidies. But also, if we all buy local produced food, then we support the farmers in that local area. And again, that means that farming is more, income is better, and that way we can do those things. And sometimes there is also that some says that we should pay more for those results, not what we are doing, like a CAP system is now working. But there's also some challenges concerning that, because we have already seen that it takes a long time, although we do measures and measures, and we don't see better water quality. And who pays those measures during that time when we wait those results for what we can pay? That is one thing. And I also want to say that all these nature organizations are very important role, and if you support them, they can also support farmers. I have a really good example from WWF from Finland, when they constructed wetlands are done in close operation with farmers, and I think that both sides are really happy about that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm quite sure that WWF colleagues are particularly happy to hear about that. Certainly, I think both you and Mark mentioned that, well, both fisheries as well as agriculture is not for hobby. This is a source of income, and for sure we all understand that these costly measures are they need to be addressed so that we really provide incentives for both of these stakeholder groups to really implement environmentally sustainable actions. But I would like actually now to pose a question to Anja. As a financier, as a representative also of the Green Bank, and what do you think, how can we actually change the pattern? How we can stop financing bad and start financing green? This is what partly what exactly Airi was also talking about, bringing the example of, for example, wetlands and this type of mitigation measures done together with environmental NGOs in this case particularly. So it sounds easy that we just stop investing into bad assets and start doing the green ones, but why it didn't happen yet?
Yes, first of all, thanks for inviting me here in this panel. It's a great pleasure to be here. How we in NEFCO, Nordic Environment Finance Corporation, owned by 5 Nordic countries, and representatives of environmental ministries from each country, so we have to have a specific focus on this. And we have solved partly this issue by having an exclusion list. So we have excluded some activities, of course these ethical exclusions, fossil fuels, etc. But we have also some other exclusions like related to forestry and husbandry exclusions. So if I may list those: commercial activities relating to primary and old growth forests, destruction of high conservation value areas, any greenfield livestock husbandry farm, meat, eggs and dairy products, keeping of animals for the primary purpose of fur production, of any activities involving fur production. And then, very highly relevant for the Baltic Sea, aquaculture farms raising fish directly in fenced-in areas of natural waters. So that is our approach on this.
Nice, thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, it's interesting to hear, and also to have this exclusion list of what not to finance. I think that's a lot of that is needed in terms of re-steering these sort of financing the bad and steering it towards financing the green. But in terms of incentives, I would like to pose a question to you, Mark. Following up on this, the same topic, how do we stop financing the bad and how can we finance the green? From a fisheries perspective, do you think that financial incentives and support today doesn't make sense? Is it following this pattern, or is it something that's missing and needs to be changed?
Thank you. Well, I can start by saying I think that for the last many years, the finance and not least the subsidies in the fisheries has been going a lot towards more efficiency, big-scale fisheries, getting bigger and bigger and getting more and more centralized in larger vessels. And also the investment in the development has also been very focused on the towed gear and on the trawling. Denmark, for instance, has used 20 millions of euros investing in different kind of selectivity on trawl. Meanwhile, some of the solutions might even be just at hand, because some of the low impact fisheries, some of the small scale fisheries can actually do a lot of what the big fisheries can, while employing more people and while actually also having a less impact on the ocean ecosystem. So in some sense, the structure that is right now is actually getting an incentive to become bigger and more efficient, which might not be the most beneficial for the ocean and the state of the Baltic. I don't necessarily think that in all cases we should aim for having more efficient fleet and more efficient boats, because we are looking into an ecosystem that's very close to I don't want to say the word collapse, but there's part of it that's showing very bad signs. And such maybe, and that's sort of our impression, we should take a step back. Perhaps go back to some of the more traditional ways of doing it that has different mechanisms that are making sure that the fisheries will never get out of line in some sense. And then it has a lot of other positive things. And I think some of the financial incentives could also be basically to promote the conversion to more traditional gear, to the low impact gear, to say perhaps it's not necessary that we bottom trawl all over. Maybe we should look into some of the more classical low impact static gears, and as such there could also be reserved areas where we say it is not an economic incentive, but it is sort of indirect, that we say that certain areas are only for special type of fisheries, and that could also be a way to incentivize using the low impact gear. And I mean, I'm going to return to it. I mean, it's going to be the elephant in the room for the fisheries perspective, because we also are in a sense where some of the direct competitors of the fishermen, because that's what they are, the cormorants and the seals that are having a major impact on the coastal fishery at least, they are a hard competitor, and they are very numerous for some of them, and in a sense it's a natural process. Right now the marine mammals and the marine predators are doing very well, and the fish stocks are very low, and in a natural state we could wait maybe a decade or some years and it will reverse. The problem is Maori fishermen cannot wait for that. If we want a low impact fisheries, we want the classical cultural fisheries that we have all over the Baltic, with the small fishermen going out during the day, coming home at evening, selling their fish to the local people. We need to take some decision, and it could also be economic decision. I mean, it's impossible to cull all the seals and all the cormorants. We cannot shoot our way out of this problem, but we could perhaps look at saying that if there's a political will to say this is a fishery that we want, then we might have to look into solutions saying, well, in this meantime, we might use some of the subsidies or some of the investment funding that we're using perhaps to develop more efficient trawl out in the open Atlantic Ocean, some of the channel towards sustaining and perhaps supporting the small local fisheries and the small impact fisheries around the Baltic Sea. So rechanneling the money in a way that we want, if that's what we want, basically.
And a follow-up question of that, you were talking about the political will needed to rechanneling this, the funding. Do you see that political will? Is it there?
I see drawings of the will, but that's somewhat far from actually putting the money where your will is. In Denmark, we do have some political will to keep and to sustain the low impact small fisheries all over, but the motion in the industry, in the fishing industry, is still going towards the efficient and big scale fisheries. So there is need for a bigger political will, both in Brussels but also in each member state, to say if we want this, we need to prioritize this, and we might also need to pay our way out of this. And then it's not nice to be in the position where you have the hat in your hand and say basically we want some money to do this, but we are in a very bad state in the Baltic Sea in the sense of commercial fisheries. There are some pelagic fisheries that are still doing good, but is that part of the problem or is it part of the solution? We don't really know. All we know is that a lot of the fish stocks are doing very bad, and that's the classical low impact coastal fisheries fish stocks. And if we still want this cultural heritage fisheries, which it is for many countries. Not a single member state in the Baltic Sea is dependent on the fisheries. It's something that we want because it's part of our tradition and part of our history. Then we might have to look at some of the financial incentives and see where do we channel what we are using to promote a fishery that's basically doing pretty well. I know the pelagic fleet is doing very well. Do they actually still need subsidies for fuel? I'm probably going to get in trouble saying this, but I mean it's not an official thing for my organization, but it's some of the question we might have to raise to say are we putting the money where we actually want to have a fisheries in the future that's sustainable and also broad, not only focused on few individuals and few larger vessels.
Tobias,
you were asking for the political will, and I think today is not a good day to be optimistic about the political will, because we don't manage to get the nature restoration law done yet in Brussels, and even today the light conditions for the agricultural funding were lifted. So it's a sad day in a way. And what you are explaining, what you think about the funding of the fishery is a funding which is compatible with the future, and exactly the opposite is happening right now in Brussels, and it's sad, actually.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a bittersweet reality that we're facing in terms of political will at the moment. Regan, you would like to comment on this one?
Yeah, and you're going to have to forgive me for being crass here, but I believe that especially something which we say in civil society a lot and don't succeed in reaching across the aisle to the industry is that when it comes to the political will, political parties are incredibly willing to use small-scale fisheries as an alibi, to use our farmers as an alibi, and that we as voters also have a duty to recognize, no matter where your political leanings actually are, like Mark said, like we've all been saying, where is the money going? Where are subsidies going? Are they going to fuel for large-scale boats? Are they going to massively over-fertilizing farms which don't necessarily need that fertilizer and whose farmers don't necessarily believe that over-fertilizing is the issue? So it does become, even if you're not a fisherman, even if you're not engaged in NGO, it becomes a question for you as a voter, especially before the EU Parliament elections, to look at what your elected representatives are saying and what they're actually doing. Because a lot of times, especially in Sweden, we have political parties using small-scale fishermen as an alibi and then getting angry when we don't meet quotas for hunting seal. Because the seal are the biggest problem, say these parties. And we had a quota for 1,500 seal to shoot, and we only showed 700 of them. So of course now we have to bail out the large-scale trawlers when in Sweden there's only a handful. So I do believe it is the obligation of us as voters to recognize when our politicians are using the working class as an alibi.
The working class as an alibi. Anja, you wanted to comment on this. What do you think about political will? Is there enough in the Baltic Sea here?
No, actually, I'm not commenting the political willingness, but I will give one example of a very good project related to fishing. And as NEFCO is jointly together with NIB managing Baltic Sea Action Plan Fund, it's a donor fund from donor funding from Sweden and Finland, and I have some examples here, and I selected 2 examples related to fishing. So the other one is Länsstyrelsen Stockholms län. The County Administrative Board of Stockholm propagates for a special regulation of fishing in the area, so they are working with that. And the other one is Tornurminen Foundation, Management Fishing of Roach and Bream in Sweden and Åland Island, Sustainable Baltic Fish Consumer Product from Small-Scale Fisheries. And that's what was asked for. Yeah, so just for information. Thank you.
Thank you, Anja. If I may continue with a follow-up question here when it comes to the Baltic Sea Action Plan Fund. Funds like that are really important, like what we heard, these type of actions that can help sort of shift the ways that we manage our Baltic Sea. Now, the Baltic Sea Action Plan Fund, as a manager of that fund, do you see any challenges with it? Do you have enough finance behind it? How is it financed today? Perhaps enlighten us a little bit on how this fund works.
Yes, thank you. The fund was established in already 2010. It has totally 74 projects. 20 is now ongoing. So there has been calls for proposals about around 1 million per year. So it's not a big amount of funds, but still I would say that quite remarkable results. I read this Coalition Clean Baltic, this document, and I was really inspired of that because and selected some project examples just based on your document. So it's really useful. So and give some flavor what kind of projects we have had. So related to eutrophication, buffer zones, related to forestry. So continuous cover forestry, 3 projects related to that. Then controlled drainage from agriculture, wetlands, structural liming and lime filter ditches, and then nutrient discharges. More than 10 projects in small wastewater treatment plants in between 2010 and 22. And then it was in 2013, there was a project which was also EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region, flagship project. So in Belarus, it was mapped the wastewater treatment plants in the Baltic Sea catchment area and prepared a priority list, so-called low-hanging fruits. Unfortunately, the political situation is now what it is, so it can't be done anything there, but still, I think that was a very, very good project. And then hazardous substances and litter. So also HELCOM has applied funds from BSAP fund, and they are screening the hazardous substances. And now there is an ongoing project to develop this strategy and action plan and development assessment tools for detect impacts. And also Finnish Environment Institute is working with industrial hazardous substances. And very interesting project in Estonia. Police and Border Guard Estonia, they completed underwater evaluation of wrecks having highest rating causing pollution. So totally 5 wrecks was reviewed. And also is mentioned this FAS chemicals. There's one project targeting on that, microplastics, pharmaceuticals, and not to mention in 2019 the Krasny Bor hotspot, where this hazardous waste lagoons water was analyzed and treatment options clarified. Yes, and furthermore, sea-based activities, 2 port reception facilities, Tallinn and Trelleborg, and then also awareness raising for ships where and how to discharge grey waters and cargo tank washing waters. So these are just examples. So I think the whole variety is quite big. Or actually very big, I would say. And the challenges. So when the fund was established, it was only Sweden and Finland who joined this fund. And I think that was somewhat a disappointment. But still, we have run this fund for more than 10 years, almost 14 years now. But now the biggest challenge is that the funds has run out. There's no more. So now I have a question from the audience. Who thinks that these kind of activities should continue? Please raise your hand. Okay. So please forward this message further.
Well, that was a very forward that message further. Well, clearly, like you were saying, Anja, there's a big array of various projects that can be financed by this fund. But how it's a fund that needs to be shared by everyone, all the Baltic Sea countries, in order to ensure that we can continue with this type of action, and not just 2 countries, and also not stopping to finance this fund. Ivona, you have something that you would like to come in and say. Please, go ahead.
If you let me, I would like to comment a little bit what was said about different interests of different stakeholders in the Baltic Sea. I think we all, depending on the profession and the interest we have to look at the Baltic Sea and any other sea as to the full ecosystem. And both from the exploiting point of view, the scientific, the protection point of view, we have to see it all together. And having in mind that any influence we have, it really end up with the effects on very different part of the ecosystem. And especially the comment to Mark about the fishery, something what was said that the fishermen want more fish. Unfortunately, they really work and they get the financial profits from the using of natural resources, which are flexible. And I think it has to be encountered in this profession that also the fishermen have to be flexible according to it. I have no recipe for how to do it, if the incentives can really help or not. But it has to be really encountered in the profession. But also one small comment to the alibi, which was mentioned, as the fishermen and farmers could be an alibi. Maybe coming down to the more local politics, I think looking from the environmental point of view, I think the interests of the sea exploiters are very often prioritized in the political decisions, and the nature has really nothing to do if we come to the interest of human being. And this is also something which needs support so far from NGOs, but also from the public opinion, from the consumers, which I mentioned before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivona. And Mark wanted to have a response.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you about the flexibility. I think we can all agree on that the situation in the Baltic Sea is very complex, and the reason why the state of the Baltic is what it is due to many things. I would though like to answer that I think the fishermen are actually very flexible. I think the fishing effort in the Baltic Sea is on a historical low. I don't think the fishery has been as low as it is at the moment. You can say many things about the non-recovering cod stocks in the at least western part of the Baltic, but I can guarantee you fishing is not one of them. Right now we are in a situation where even the scientists have a hard time explaining why are the state of the fish stock as they are at the moment. And I think in some sense, what the fishermen are showing is a lot of flexibility. We have many fishermen in the eastern part of Denmark that is basically struggling very much because like the livelihood, what they're living off is gone. They cannot fish cod anymore. They cannot. The place quota is okay, but it's very small place. And my fishermen don't fish small fish. It can't really. It doesn't make their ends. They have to put them out of. They have to take them out of the net every time. And if you fish small fish, it just doesn't make sense for them. So in a sense, they have no more fish left to fish. And you can explain a lot about how they are part responsible in the situation it is, and that might be true, and that be the case. But the fishery's effort and the amount of fishing vessel in the Baltic Sea is in my opinion, at a historical low point. So the fishery has done a lot to try to recover the situation, and they are, they have reduced their fisheries a lot, and now it's sort of time for the other part of the equation, the other part of the problem, the other part of this complex system, to also sort of acknowledge that, I mean, we have reduced the fisheries, but we also need to look at some of the other pressure points that are keeping the Baltic Sea in a bad state, and the plan is a very good way to start.
Thank you very much, Mark. And we do have examples also when the stopped fisheries actually brought up quite a good recovery, like in Öresund after stopping trawling. Now we have tuna safaris, and tuna is back. So this is a really good indication. And though I wanted also to ask Anja a very direct question whether NEFCO and particularly the BSAP Trust Fund would be eager to finance also, for example, changing to the low-impact gears. But, well, you can respond quickly, but I have another question to Tobias.
Okay, this is if somebody sends this application, so we need to review that very carefully and then make our assessment, and then it's finally the donors who will decide. So who has donors? So we have a steering committee who make the ultimate decision. So I can't answer that question, unfortunately.
I understand, of course. But actually, I wanted to ask a question to Tobias because, well, we have heard about the new. Rather novel or innovative funding mechanism that you have in Germany, or perhaps it is Schleswig-Holstein as unique example, and that is about the nature protection funding coming from offshore renewable energy tenders. And with the rapid expansion of offshore renewables in the Baltic Sea region, we are wondering actually if this can be something to share with other countries.
First of all, please allow me to come back to the discussion about who is responsible, because I was having this discussion very intensely when I was discussing about the MPAs in Schleswig-Holstein. And it was very common that I was on panels and the water sport community said, oh, it's the farmers. The farmers said, it's the fishermen, or it's the ammunition. It's always somebody else. And the situation of the Baltic is so complex and so bad that we have to get out of this vicious circle. We have to stop finger pointing at each other who is responsible. And to answer your question, we have a new law that makes the renewable energy companies pay for the erection of windmills in the oceans. And it's a lot of money coming from that business, and a lot of money is being earned in this business. And I'm not only the Minister for the Nature Protection, but also for Climate Protection and Energy. And I am very sure that we need all those windmills offshore. But it's another use of the ocean, and it's another fact that is harming the ecosystems. And therefore, I am convinced that it's a good idea to make the renewable energy businesses pay for that, because we as humans, we pay our bills for the electricity, and we can pay for using the oceans by windmills. And that doesn't mean, it's not like a deal of indulgence, and somebody pays and he doesn't have to care where to put the windmills. Everybody has to care where to put the windmills, and environment assessment has to be there. But the idea to make someone who earns a lot of money with energy pay for it is a very good idea. And we are actually looking at the money for funding our action plan for the Baltic.
Okay, thank you very much. And I will pass to Johanna.
Thank you. If I can just continue that, Tobias, do you, from that, it's a federal fund, sort of, yeah. So how does do you see any challenges for this fund to be available for more, like the action in Schleswig-Holstein to fund your Baltic Sea action plan? Do you see any challenges of this funding trickling down to more of the local level?
It's always a challenge, and I meet Steffi Lemke, who is the German Minister for the Environment, quite often. And every time I see her, I ask her for the money. And the federal government is open for funding nature protected marine protected areas and action plans. And but still, we have a lot of bureaucracy in Germany, in Europe, everywhere. So it will take some time to trickle down.
Well, then we'll see. It will perhaps take some time before we know whether this could be a solution that could be inspiring other countries on how to alleviate or ensure that we have finance available for nature action. Mark, you would like to comment? Please come in.
No, it's just a small addition to the whole talk about wind farms, because in Denmark, at least, where we also are very good, not good, but we are very forward in putting a lot of marine wind farms. In Denmark, there are certain rules on what activity you can do within a wind farm, and it's basically based on that there's cables everywhere. So, for instance, you cannot legally bottom trawl. So, in some sense, when you're making the wind farms, you're also making an area that's reserved for different. Not protection per se, but if you do it right, if you use the windmill as basis for perhaps some sort of stone reefs, you can sort of incorporate both having a good way of producing clean energy, but you can also perhaps use the area that you're using with the wind farms to actually benefit the ecosystem, the marine ecosystem. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing every time, but it could also be beneficial. And if you, on top of that, can channel some of the money that's come in on a governmental level and use it for good, then I mean that's great.
Yeah, that is something interesting pointed out. They don't need to be a bad thing. I think something that we say from WWF side, but also from CCB, we've been looking into a lot of how do we plan this expansion of offshore wind farm, that it has to be done in a nature-friendly way. Looking at how the Baltic Sea is a little bit of a clean slate in compared to the North Sea, for instance. But how can we plan this more jointly in a better way and make use of our space so we have this positive impact that you were talking about, Mark, rather than it being another added pressure on our sea that already sees too many pressures at the moment. Going back a little bit to the sort of stop financing the bad, stop financing the green, Regan, from a youth perspective and listening now to a little bit of the discussion that we've had, how do you see, what is needed to stop financing the bad and stop financing the green?
I think in many ways it's a question of mindset and whether or not you're someone from my background with a youth organization who can afford to go out in the streets and be radical, or someone like Anya who sits at a fund who has to manage these things. Either way, we have to look at the Baltic as an investment in our future. We have to treat clean energy, sustainable fisheries, organic agriculture, and forestry. We have to treat these as an investment in a future industry. We have to treat this as a question of security and sovereignty for the natural resources which we are using. And we have to treat the Baltic, whether it's out of a naturalist perspective or an economic perspective, as something which could continue to and provide more ecosystem services in the future to actually benefit the people in the Baltic Sea states. And this is a mindset that we need to see at the federal level, at the municipal level, but also within the finance sector, who engage less with industry and less with science than they have ever before. Instead, we're seeing that deals are being struck on old values and old preconceived notions about what a sector can mean and what a sector could look like in terms of their actual extraction of a natural resource. So I do think it's a question of mindset, and I do think it's a question of really treating a healthy Baltic like it could be an investment, because it is. It's an investment for my generation, but also for yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Regan. Actually, talking about the mindsets, I wanted to address a question to Ivona. And we quite often hear about the need for further financing for research and the uncertainties that are there that needs to be addressed. But I would actually like to ask you, Ivona, to develop a little bit and elaborate on how we can close the gap in funding that is addressing, again, the gaps between science, policy, and implementation. So something a little bit different from what scientists usually asking for.
Yes, I have been a scientist who is very much involved also in this work of HELCOM, Azkaban's, ISIS. So this is also an expert and advisory role. So I think I have dealt with the politicians, with the political decisions, being very often not really satisfied with the decision which grow up from the scientific evidence. The problem is the knowledge is never complete. And this argument is very much used by the decision makers, by the politicians. We need more data, we need more evidence, even if we have very clear answers on very many questions. And I would give the example of the Baltic flag species, which is obviously harbor porpoises, which we fight with the extinction of the species from the Baltic Sea. And we work, many years, and we try to collect the information. We probably won't collect more because of the very, very little population of those animals in the Baltic Sea. But there is always an excuse that we need more data. We need to know which are the hotspots for the bycatch, where the animals are occurring more often, where less often. We know that this species is very rare, and we could say that it really occurs occasionally in any waters in the Baltic Sea, but it is a genetically and geographically different population. So this is really a very sad story that we are ready to implement the measures, very regular and very efficient measures, but there is no will to implement this. Saying this, what I want to underline is that this is not always the money needed to to create a dialogue between the scientists, between politicians, stakeholders, and everybody who's interested, but just to find a common understanding and agreed solutions to those problems. And then this probably the effect of this work need money, but I think this is also another story, and I'm sure that as long as the scientists are involved in the active protection and the working on the sake of environment, there might be money found in many different sources. But one of which I would say is this European Maritime and Fishery Fund, which it probably also depends on the countries, but it's not very much dedicated to the biodiversity protection. But in general, it's very much for fishery, sustaining the fishery, and I think that there is. Just a problem of finding the good dialogue between all these sides to make good projects which really include all the aspects of this, ending with solutions implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivona. We have a comment here from Riga.
Yes, thank you. I think one of the things that we could also, or at least which from an NGO background is easier to say than implement, is not only making sure we close the gaps between science, implementation, stakeholders, and policymakers, but also broadening the gaps of what data collection can actually look like. There's a couple of efforts in Sweden, and none of these are large scale yet, but on involving both sports fishers and even some commercial fishers in citizen science data collection for certain species. We were talking earlier, Mark, about how you have fishermen who do report that they're seeing porpoises, and yes, we can make the connection between that these porpoises are following where there is herring to catch, because that's what the fishermen know and what the porpoises want as well. But this is also, in a broader sense, when we involve stakeholders, when we involve farmers, people who work in forestry, people who work in fishing, in the data collection which the grant owners and the fund dispensers so desperately want, we're also broadening the gaps between closing the gap between how we perceive fisheries, forestry, and agriculture as somehow independent from the environmental movement and from environmental science. I don't want to be the person who says, kumbaya, we're all in this together, but we can be, especially when we're fighting for our shared future for a healthy Baltic Sea.
We're all in this together for a shared future of the healthy Baltic Sea. I think that was a very... Yeah.
I think Anya wanted
Airi, would you like to comment on that one? Please come in, yes.
I think that open dialogue is really important, and we need scientific results to make decisions. And the question is also how the results reach the farmers and fishermen and so on. But and that means that we need the good advisory services. But then it's also questions about how these results reach the politicians, and do they want to do those decisions based on the science? And because we have different kind of groups, they have different kind of voters, and we want to make decisions that we get more and more votes. And that is just changing, and politics is changing every 6 years, every 4 years, whatever it is, and like we farmers, we would like to have a little bit stable situation, because when for example, when the system in EU is changing, then we have again new measures, new targets, and sometimes those measures are still same, but the rules behind that are changing. Then when we have just learned to do good things, they said that no, this is not any more good. You are supposed to do more and more about that. And farmers, although water protection is so important, farmers need to do things also for climate, biodiversity. They need to think about production rules concerning production. They need to think demand of different kinds of products and so on. This is so complex. And when the political situation is all the time changing, it's more and more complex thing.
Thank you, Ari. With that, I would like to open the floor for any questions here from the audience. Do you have any questions to our panelists here? Please raise your hands, and if you want to address a specific panelist, name that person, or if it's a question to all in the panel.
Hello, my name is Wietse Hermans. I have a specific question for Anja, but everyone can reply to that also. I heard many examples about restoring wetlands, a lot of water quality measures which were funded from the fund. But do you also do any measures on river restoration, specifically dam removal? Because it's a very important issue for many fish species. Also for fish migration being important for a healthy fish population, so also for fishery. Is anything being done already? And if not, is anything planned? Because often enough, a small measure, like a small dam being removed or a small fund being allocated to the owner can help an important fish migration route.
Okay, thank you for the question. So currently we don't have that kind of project proposal. And first, we are like fund managers, so we review the project proposals, and unfortunately we haven't received that kind of proposal. But when we have, hopefully we will have more funds and we will arrange a new call. So it's always possible to send an application for that. So definitely it will be gone through. So, and furthermore, my colleague here, Nea Westerlund, who is sitting there, and it's a contact person. So she today said that now it's April, and we have already now received several questions, about 10 inquiries. That when do you have the next call? And the sad answer is no. Currently, we don't have the possibility to arrange a call. That's the situation now. Thank you. Are there any others who want to answer this?
I can actually just comment also, sorry, of course not as a panelist, but regarding particularly this question related to dam removal, what we have learned, and correct me if I'm wrong, but particularly looking to Estonians, that EMFF, that Ivona was referring to, EMFF funding can be used also for removal of dams, and there was a case on that.
There's also not quite a lot, but there are certain EU projects which go towards dam removal, such as the Amber project. So even though EU grant application is a nightmare, take it from civil society, it's worth looking into.
Jan Helin from Luke, research organization in Finland. Do we want to tax oil or do we want to tax wind power? Concerning the current political situation, one might argue that one is destroying the climate and fueling the war, plus runs out eventually anyway. And now we talk about taxing wind here instead. There was a question of which is bad, which is worse for our investment. So maybe some thoughts on that?
Anyone in the panel who would like to address that question? Yeah, Tobias?
Of course, we want to tax fossil fuel production, and we are already taxing fossil fuel production, and we should tax it even higher and more. On the other hand, the fossil fuel production, the maritime fossil fuel production especially, will be phased out in the next years. And In my opinion, the money that has to be given by the wind farms is not a taxation but a compensation for the use of the ecosystem. And it's widely accepted among the wind energy firms and the branch and the business to pay that money, because they understand and they have it in their DNA that they rely on a functioning ecosystem too. So we didn't have a lot of discussions about it when it was introduced in Germany.
Yeah. Do you want to? Did you want to? Okay, sorry, Regan. We've got also another question from the online audience. Well, we've got a couple, but at least I wanted to share one. And that is about conventional farming and so-called economic optimized fertilization practices that are quite often used, and unfortunately what we know, they are causing over-fertilization quite a lot. And we also know about nutrient balanced fertilization practices that we would like to promote more and more. So I guess that the question is probably addressed to you, Airi. So what do you think, how farmers can also promote nutrient balanced fertilization, and perhaps what kind of financial instruments are needed to actually incentivize and help promoting that?
Actually, I think that optimized fertilization and fertilization based on crop needs, what crop need to grow and produce the good yield, and what there is already, what nutrients are already on soil that you don't need to add anymore. That is important, and that is also really good economic value for a farmer if you don't need to fertilize so much. And when you are not fertilizing so much, then it's the leaching risk of nutrients is lower. Then actually I think that we don't need support for that we are fertilizing in balanced way, because it's really win-win situation. You earn already when you are not over-fertilizing.
Okay.
And I think that is that kind of win-win situation which we should have more.
Yeah, thank you. That's, of course, very much appreciated. A response from farmers community. And I have another question also from online audience, and that is about the exclusion list that you, Anja, mentioned at NEFCO. And a person asking was curious how many of the funders are using similar type of instruments to actually exclude those bad investments and bad financing and calls. And, well, is it a problem to find an investor for an environmentally unfriendly business?
So somebody is going to do that, or? No, actually, very many financiers have exclusion lists. The international financing institutions, they differ slightly, but they have. But what comes to this our exclusion list, it's quite strict. It's stricter than what the others have. But also commercial banks may have. We did some mapping, but I don't now remember by heart all the results. But they have, but not as strict as we have.
Thank you. And with that, I think we're a little bit wrapping up our panel discussion here. It's been a very lively discussion and interesting topics. I'm not sure whether we answered our questions fully, but it's really good to start these conversations about how do we ensure that we have enough funding available and re-steering from financing bad to financing green. There's a lot of discussion talk about climate and climate action and funding for climate action. We need similar discussion for when it comes to biodiversity. But Misha, do you think have we come to answering our questions? Have we closed our loop here? Or?
Well, I actually have one more question, and that's to Regan. I would like to have this before we actually go into wrapping up this discussion, which I really appreciated a lot as well. And just to close the loop of what we've been talking about, and as you, Regan, already introduced your vision of what kind of Baltic Sea you would like to inherit, I just would like to ask a very simple and short question, so that you could actually ask each of your fellow panelists in one word what kind of demand you would have to each of them regarding how to reach the good environmental status of the Baltic.
I've never been that concise in my life, and I think you know this. Where to start? I'll start with Anya, I guess. And to you in the finance sector, I ask that you trust. Trust in civil society, trust in unions, trust in the industry, that there are people out there who aren't just startups in Silicon Valley who really do want to make a difference. To Tobias, I ask that you hurry. You are one of the few ministers with your similar role who are working toward a transition, but it's not enough. We need to phase out now, and we need to go green, I guess was something we all kind of know, but we also need to go blue for the Baltic. To Airi, I ask that in these times against the protests against the CAP and the Green New Deal, that you raise your voice, that's 3 words, but still, to really put out there that there is interest within the agricultural community to act sustainably. To Mark, I ask that you act with balance, balance between the needs of the fishers and the needs of the fisheries and the fish themselves. And to Ivona, I ask that you dare. Science can't lose momentum. Science can't be lost in a sea of other concerns, because it is, in my opinion, something which links all of the sectors and the actors. It's also what links human activity to the natural world, is your work and your findings. And lastly, to my fellow panelists and to the audience, both in person and online, I ask that you listen. Not just to me, because I'm always talking, not just to civil society, because we put you in this fancy hotel room, but to really take to heart what every aspect of all of your work actually really entails. It can be really easy to lose hope and really feel defeatist when we're talking about an ecosystem like the Baltic Sea. But listen to the stories that are out there, the good and the bad, to decide for yourselves how you, as an individual, as an organization, or whatever it is you represent, can really act to make a difference and hopefully leave my generation a Baltic which has more than 2.5 fish in it. Thank you.
I think it is difficult to wrap up better than it was now.
Yeah, I have to say, I think that the future with more than 2.5 fish for the Baltic Sea is it's one that every one of us want to have. And yes, I don't think we can wrap up better than that, Regan. But I have to say, Misha, I was writing down a few things, listening to the panel discussion here and where we need to go. And I'll come back to the fact that we need to sort of talk about the biodiversity and that investing in action for biodiversity for the Baltic Sea is an investment for the future, like you were saying previously, Regan. And that we also need to act local. We heard from Tobias very good examples, but Iri was saying we need to take care of our local waters. Are we within the HELCOM community a little bit? We need our regional cooperation. It's really important. We need regional cooperation between countries. We need to improve that. We need to improve that when it comes to building offshore wind farms on a clean slate. But we need to make sure that it trickles down. The regional agreements, the regional actions need to trickle down to what can be done at a local level, what can be done for your local waters, was something that I got stuck in the back of my head. And I'm wondering whether we're good enough at communicating what needs to be done at a local level, and also bringing up good examples that are being done at a local level that we can learn from, and not having to reinvent the wheel constantly. I'm not sure, Misha, what were your thoughts from this?
Well, again, difficult to add to what's already been said, but I've heard a lot about the communication as well as stakeholder engagement and practices being implemented, and novel solutions also applied. So sharing experiences, sharing knowledge, not only within one country, but also between the countries, and certainly listening to what Tobias was saying about both the opposition and difficult talks, well, not to say shitstorm also, but yeah. But actually winning also a lot. And indeed, as a minister of not only energy transition, climate, nature protection, and whatsoever else, you have a lot in your mandate. And perhaps that is also an approach, as Regan said, well, hurry. Because we don't have so many ministers like you around the Baltic Sea, not at the provincial level or regional government level, but in the national level either. And this is truly something that we wanted also to address through the BSAP update and implementation, that we truly need to look into ecosystem-based management. So it is not just about the actions that are aiming at, as I said in my very first words of introduction, aiming at, well, mitigating specific discharge of emission, but actually thinking, well, on a wider scope, on a more comprehensive, holistic approach, seeing that we would need to restore the backbone, we need to restore nature. That provides also healing, hopefully, for the whole Baltic Sea marine ecosystem. So that's what I wanted to conclude also from my side.
Good. Well, with that, I think we can conclude our panel discussion. I hope that you have been inspired, who's been sitting here in the room, listening to what do we need to do to speed up action, but also examples on how this type of action can be financed. And I hope that you take it with you, take it back home with you in the work that you're doing, whether it's from civil society, research, in governmental institutions. How can you in your work to address the need to re-steer finance from the bad towards the blue in the Baltic Sea? So with that, thank you very much. And we would like to thank our panelists for an engaging discussion. Also, we have a little bit of a gift for you, I think, Misha.
I think so, yes. I'll just bring it in a sec.
But with that, please give our panelists a big round of applause.
We actually have a very nice collection of gifts here. Yeah, I should speak into the mic. First, we have the harbor porpoise, the beautiful animal, unique one that we have, the only whale that we have in the Baltic Sea. And then we have something. Well, we hope that you will have something on this plate also. And this is the plate also with a lot of different protected animals that we really take care of in the Baltic. And a mug as well to drink something. And yeah, just a keychain. So many thanks to all our panelists also from our side and from the whole civil society around the Baltic Sea. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And let's go out and work to save the Baltic Sea.
Good.